Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
And I'm Erin Palmer, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
Joining us is Carol. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Such a pleasure
Carol,
to have you here.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we get talking about your book, please tell our viewers a little bit about who you are.
Sure. My name is Carol Mitchell, and I live in Fairfax, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. I was actually born and raised in the Caribbean. I was born on the island of Nevis and raised in Trinidad, so I speak with a Trini accent. I've also lived in Barbados and Jamaica briefly, and most of my family is Jamaican. So my background is similar in that respect, and only in that respect, to Amaya, the protagonist of What Start Bad in Morning. So I'm kind of a late bloomer to writing. I began my career in IT. I have an MBA from Wharton Business School. And then I pivoted in 2007 around then. I wrote several books for children before I got an MBA at George Mason University in Virginia, where I still am. I'm teaching writing full time there now. I have a husband, two children. They're grown, almost flown. And so I have more time now to embark on new adventures, to reinvent myself, so to speak.
I love that. I love that. There's never, ever a bad time to embark on a new adventure. Listen, an adventure is exactly what we need. And so I'm ready to get into this adventure that you created, this entire world that you've created and now almost ready to put out into the world. So let's talk about your new novel, including what inspired you to start writing it.
So as I mentioned before, I did my MFA, I'm sorry, at George Mason University. And while I was there, I wrote a short story about a young man who was having some struggles with his interactions with other people and with his family. And I got really interested in this character. He was neurodiverse. As I wrote more about him, I found myself much more interested in his mother than in him. You find in a lot of my writing the themes of motherhood. And so I started writing more about his mother, who's Amaya, and he is also in the book, Taiwo, her son. But that's sort of how I got onto this trail. So in the original stories that I was writing, the young man that I was writing about had done this terrible thing. And so that terrible thing kind of grew into something that actually affected his mom very, in fact, affected his mom. And so that became the genesis for the story.
I see. And that's wonderful. Like you said, you started out with a short story. What did you get any feedback where people were like, oh, this seems like it could grow into something more? Or were you so enamored with that short story that you really wanted to expand on it and see how it played out?
Yeah, so the short story never made it out into the world. I did just write about that more, and as I said, I got more interested in the other characters. I had a professor say to me once that if you want to deepen a story or increase the tension in a story, one way is to add characters. And so I added this character. So there was the mom came in, and then the mom's sister came in, and it just took on this whole life of its own that I can't even claim. And the end result was What Start Bad in Morning, the story of Amaya's discovery of her past, because she's forgotten it. She's buried the memories. And, the book kind of follows the unraveling of those memories until she finally remembers what the initial trauma that she experienced was.
I love hearing about your creative process. It's really interesting. And what an endeavor to write an entire novel and to have it spark from a shorter story and smaller set of characters. Can you tell us about some of the themes that you explored in writing this book?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, in What Start Bad in Morning, one of the main themes is motherhood. I'm a mom, and that is something that's really very important to me. And it's one of the many things that defines me. I'm so proud of my children. And so I write a lot about you feel a lot of pride, but there's a lot of push and pull with that. You want to do things for yourself, and then there's this need to care for your children. And that's a need that it never ends. And that's the case for Maya as well, because her son is neurodiverse, and he's independent, but he's still very reliant on her. The book also talks a lot about immigration, which is a story I'm very familiar with. I'm a immigrant in this country, and it takes it. The characters experience immigration in different ways, though. There's some who are there legally, who are there illegally, who are there in a sort of transient position that's very unstable, and they're worried about what's going to happen to them. So it looks at really different aspects of immigration and how that goes about. It also talks about memory. Amaya has forgotten her past. Her aunt is suffering from dementia, so it tackles that from different aspects, and then of generational trauma, because what Amaya's experiencing is actually the result of events which were out of her control, and really a result of a civil situation in the country of Jamaica. So there's the impact of trauma and loss on someone, and how pretty much you can't really hide from from what some of these things. Like, when we meet Amaya, she thinks everything is wonderful in her world, but really it isn't, because she hasn't dealt with this initial issue that she has faced when she was much younger. And so that's kind of where the title comes from, because what it's saying is that what started bad in the morning, it can end good in the evening time. You've got to resolve it before you can really move forward. So those are it's a lot, but it deals with all of those things.
Awesome, beautiful. I'm so glad you explained that, because I was actually just going to ask you how the title came about. So I'm so glad that you said that, because I've heard, of course, this phrase before. It's something that is said. Now, I wanted to ask you how the story was shaped and influenced by the locations. And I like that you spoke about the fact that, dealing with immigration is one of the things within this book, because for immigrants, it becomes that taking on that identity and going through everything that you go through to be an immigrant in another country. It is something that, really influences us in so many ways and inspires us in so many ways. So talk to me a little bit about that, as well as how, all the locations represented in the book, how the story was shaped and influenced by those places.
Yes, thanks for that question. So the story it begins in Virginia, in Northern Virginia, and then once Amaya's memories start to unravel, we go back to Trinidad, which is where she was educated. She moved there to do her first degree at the University of the West Indies. Pretty much she was trying to escape Jamaica at the time, and then it moves back to Jamaica, and she actually goes there. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that in an earlier version of this book, she didn't actually travel to Jamaica. And then at some point I realized that was really what was missing, that in order to really face the events and the trauma that she had, it wasn't enough for her to sit in Virginia and sort of reimagine them, but she had to actually go back there. And so the locations, I think, adds a lot of flavor to the book. It adds a lot of interest to the book and depth to the book, that she is experiencing immigration in so many different facets. And once, when she moves from Jamaica to Trinidad, you would think it's within the Caribbean, that it would be much easier for her, but she still finds herself feeling very much displaced, very much disconnected, and unsure of how to make this her home. And then at
Mhm.
the first opportunity, her mother-in-law wins well, she wasn't her mother-in-law at the time, but she wins the visa diversity lottery. And so she marries her boyfriend so that she can also come to the US. And so she's again using that as a vehicle to distance herself from her past,
Mhm.
physically and, with time.
Yeah.
So the locations are really important in that respect, as it shows her, it's not even her development but her devolution in a way,
Mhm.
because she's running from something that she really needs to face. So they're significant in that respect very much, and also significant because I mean I wasn't running from anything, but I have kind of traced her path in a very real way, from one island to the next, and then to the US. So I understand that whole idea of not of trying to find home, always being searching for
Mm.
what is really where do I really belong? How do I really fit in?
Yeah.
It's such an important theme, and sounds like your novel has a strong sense of place or many places, and I can't wait to read it. I'm wondering what some of your personal goals as a writer are and what's up next for you.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I'm actually working on another novel, which is very different from What Start Bad in Morning, I have to say. And my goal with What Started Bad in Morning was really to add to the growing canon of Caribbean literature, and to have to entertain and also to expose readers to the Caribbean, to have our stories told to, in authentic ways by our own people.
Mhm.
With my new novel, I'm very interested in where our world is going, and with climate change, specifically with regard to how the Caribbean is going to be impacted by climate
Mhm.
change, especially as we have contributed a we're being impacted much more than we have actually contributed.
Contributed. Yep.
And so it's a real danger for us. And I began to think about, what our future will look like. And so the novel that I'm writing now, it actually was supposed to have begun in, way in the distant future. However, I began writing the backstory so that I could really understand how these people
Mm.
got to that point. And now I think the whole thing is, so it's going to be like 100 years from today going forward, and have a lot of characters, a lot of interesting events and decision making. And so I'm really excited about writing that. I've written about a third of it so far. So that's kind of where that's going and what I'm going to do next. Because I think the literature is really important. Like, we have to, as Caribbean people, we have to write ourselves into the future. We have to,
Yes.
so that people know that we're important. It's important
Mhm.
that, land is important, like where you're from is important. And we can't just say, okay, well, we're going to be underwater in 10 years, so let's just
Mhm.
walk away from that. It's not that simple. And so if our goal or our role as writers, I think, is to make sure that people can imagine themselves in the future, and then therefore start to take steps to
Mhm.
ensure that that's achieved.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I just love that so much because I believe we just like definitely share the same outlook on writing, and just especially how important these stories are, especially placing yourselves in the future, and being able to imagine a world where we're able to achieve anything that we can, a limitless world, as well as, depending on what we do now, a world with many limits, you know what I mean? And just being able to look at that, explore those stories, and, put ourselves in those stories. So I love that so much. Now, how can people not only pick up your book, how can they also see you in person, on tour, talk about any book launches, any upcoming panels that you're going to be a part of, all the things. So how can people get up to date with you?
Okay, thank you so much for asking the most important question. So, the book is coming out on the 18th of September. I'm doing a pre-launch in New York at with the book Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival, which that event is going to be on September. It's a Sunday, September 10th. If the September 10th is not a Sunday, I do mean the Sunday. Sorry, I sometimes dates I get confused with them, but it's going to be at NYU. So if you go to the Brooklyn Caribbean Literature Festival website or follow me on Instagram, you can find out more about that. And then in DC, we're having a launch at the Sankofa Video and Books. And that's going to be the night of September 19th, which is a Tuesday evening at 7. And so I'm really excited because I have a big community in New York and I have a big community in this area, of course.
I'm putting it on my calendar right now.
Me too.
So we're going to be doing those two things. And then I'm going to be doing something at Fall for the Book, which is a book festival connected with George Mason, and that's going to be taking place October 14th, I believe. Again, I'm so sorry, I'm not 100% sure of the date, but it's a Saturday, and I believe it's the 14th of October, and that's going to be about midday. And all of this information, I'm trying to be really active on Instagram and make sure people know what's happening. So you can follow me on social media at Write with Carol. That's WRITE with Carol. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. And if you go on Instagram in the link to my bio, you can get all of the information that you need to see where I'm going to be appearing. I'm going to be in DC, in New York, in Charlottesville, in Atlanta. And so I'm hoping that I'll be somewhere near you and you'll come check me out, talk with me, find out more about the book, and buy a copy. Thanks.
Really wonderful. I can't wait to check out your book. Thank you so much, Carol, for joining us. Viewers, please look below in the description for links. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Carol.
It's been wonderful to be here. Thank you.
To those watching, please follow Team Rayceen on social media.
And click around our YouTube channel and check out our other interviews, blogs, forums, and more. And while you're there, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, viewers, thank you for watching.